Daughter blocked me after the divorce without listening to my side of the story, contacted me now 8 years later to get my inheritance. My wife, 48F, and I, 54NM, divorced 8 years ago. And my daughter, 28F, cut me off completely and sided with her mom without even caring about how I felt. It took me a long time to come to terms with how things ended up and find some peace in my life. This was partly because my ex-wife did everything she could to ruin my reputation, but mostly because I loved my daughter so much, and losing her was the hardest thing ever. She was already an adult when we divorced, so I couldn't be in her life unless she wanted me to be, and she seemed to have made up her mind to choose her mom over me. I had no other family except my mom who had Alzheimer's, so this was definitely the worst thing that ever happened to me. I tried to reach out to my daughter several times after the divorce, but she was adamant on being on her mom's side and never gave me a chance to tell my side of the story. At one point, my ex contacted me and threatened to sue me for harassment if I didn't leave my daughter alone. That made it clear to me, and I stopped contacting her. I spent the last 8 years taking care of my mom and working on my career. I had some casual relationships here and there, but I felt like I couldn't trust anyone fully after my divorce. That's been my life for almost a decade. Sorry if I sound like a downer. The reason I'm writing this post is because my daughter got in touch with me after all this time. I was ecstatic and thought that she finally realized that the divorce was not all my fault. It was also comforting, especially because my mother passed away recently, and I've been coping with that loss by myself and needed some comfort and family. So, my daughter got in touch with me a few months after my mother passed away. I got a call from a number I didn't know, and I answered to hear a woman's voice on the other end. I didn't know it was my daughter, and I didn't even recognize her voice, because it had been that long since we talked, and I was very surprised when she said who she was. She said that she saw on Facebook that her grandma passed away and wanted to see how I was doing. I was shocked. I didn't even know that she followed me online and thought it was nice of her. I thanked her for calling and said that I was okay, and told her that I missed her. We chatted for a while, and she said that if I want to meet and catch up in person instead of the phone, she would like that. I was very happy and agreed right away. We decided to meet at my house over the weekend. I was really excited about seeing her after all these years, so I am writing this post to share my excitement with anyone who might be reading. I hope we can rebuild our relationship again, or at least get to know each other. My daughter came over to have dinner with me because I wanted to make something for her. I was anxious and excited when I first opened the door. I didn't even recognize her because it's been almost a decade since I last saw her, and she was just a kid back then. We started talking, and even though it was a bit awkward at first, I think we both relaxed after a while. She told me about her life and what she does for work, and I told her about my life. After dinner, we finally addressed the elephant in the room. I asked her why she never tried to listen to my side of the story during the divorce and picked her mom by default. I mean, I admitted that her mother was more involved as a parent because she was a stay-at-home mom, and back then, I worked in construction and worked long hours, but I always did my best to spend as much time as I could with my daughter. My daughter then said that she was sorry for how things turned out and that she was too young to understand things and got influenced by how her mom made things look. Basically, my ex-wife made me out to be the worst person ever who didn't care about anyone but himself, and since she never heard my side of the story, she never doubted whatever her mom said. We talked some more about this, and things were going well until she finally told me why she was there. We had been talking for hours at that point when I asked her what made her contact me after all these years. She looked a bit uneasy, and I told her that she could be truthful with me. Well, then she said that she actually had been following me on Facebook, and when she saw that her grandmother had died, she thought lawyers would get in touch with her about her inheritance, and when no one did, she thought she should contact me personally. She said that she wanted to give me some time and space to mourn, but she had recently gotten engaged and could really use some money to help with the wedding costs. It felt like getting hit in the stomach, honestly. I thought that after all these years, my prayers were answered and I could have a family again, but it turns out she never cared for me at all, and all this was a way for her to get her inheritance. The funny thing is that it's not even her inheritance legally, it's all mine, and if only she wasn't such a horrible daughter to me, she would definitely get most, if not all, of it. I don't care about money. I never have, honestly. I live in a house of my own, don't have any costly hobbies, and mostly buy my clothes from Target. Even if the inheritance wasn't an issue in the first place, I wouldn't have minded helping out with her wedding at all if she had contacted me nicely instead of trying to use me and only caring about the inheritance. All of this was going through my head at the same time. I somehow kept my calm and asked her if that was all she wanted. She got very defensive and said that the inheritance was secondary and her main goal was to reconnect with me, and she would never forgive herself for not contacting me while her grandmother was alive. She said that she had wanted to contact me for years, but never got the nerve to actually do it because she thought I would never forgive her for pushing me out without an explanation, and that she was also manipulated by her mom. But I could see from the panic look on her face that she was just trying to make things better so I could forgive her, and I wondered if she was just after the money. I asked her how she knew she had an inheritance, and she said that a couple of years before the divorce, she was visiting my late mother, and she told her that she wanted her to inherit everything left by my father, who passed away years ago, as she was the only grandchild in the family. I don't have any siblings, and at that point, my marriage was fine, so I understand why my mother might have said that to my daughter. I mean, if the divorce never happened or my daughter didn't leave me for years after the divorce, the money would have been hers, as I've already mentioned. But the thought of her only caring about the money and giving me false hope was absolutely heartbreaking. I was crushed, but did my best not to let her know at that moment. I thought the only way of testing my daughter's intentions would be to see how she would react if I told her there was no money to inherit. I asked her how much she expected from the inheritance, and she made quite a reasonable guess. I could tell that some planning went into this whole thing. I then told her that I'm sorry to let her down, but that her grandmother actually left everything to me years ago, and I plan on using that money to start a business. So, I couldn't help her out. I offered to help out for her wedding with my own money by offering a few grand for wedding expenses. The disappointment on her face confirmed my worst fears. She said that she was grateful for my offer, but as the only grandchild, she should get at least some of the inheritance, because it's her grandma's money that she was promised. I told her that I wished I could help her, but my decision was final, and there was nothing I could do for her if she wasn't satisfied with the money I was offering. She turned completely red in the face and started getting visibly angry. She told me again to rethink my decision, but I repeated that I was going to stick to what seemed right to me, and that's when she revealed her true colors and said something that verified all my doubts about her true intentions. She told me that she should have known that I'll always be the selfish a whole. Her mom said I was, and she's happy I'm alone in life. I looked at her with barely hidden disgust. Her words were hurtful, but at that point, I knew what to expect. I just didn't expect her to get that brutally honest that fast. That's all. She started to say something else, but I stopped her before she could speak. I told her that I should have known she was her mother's daughter, and that the only reason she would contact anyone was to ask for a favor. I also told her that using the fact that I was mourning for my mother to try and manipulate me was disgusting even for a person like her. She tried to say something at that point, but I just laughed in her face and said that if only she had not blocked me all those years ago, she would have gotten my text about her grandmother and would have probably gotten most, if not all, of the inheritance. That sentence had the effect I wanted. She looked totally confused and asked me what I meant. I told her to unblock me on her old number so I could resend her all the texts that could never get delivered. Well, she did. I forwarded all the texts where I pleaded with her to hear me out and even let her know that her grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer and I wanted them to meet before she forgot about her only grandchild completely. This was completely true, as at the beginning of her illness, my mom did often mention my daughter and asked to see her. I remember how it broke my heart to not be able to fulfill that wish, and now, this ungrateful, cruel child had the nerve to ask for inheritance. To my daughter's credit, I will admit that she looked ashamed after reading all of those messages. She apologized to me, but said that looking at these messages, it was clear that her grandma would want her to have her share of the inheritance, and it isn't fair for me to punish her like this. She said that she was young and didn't know any better during the divorce, or else she would have handled things differently. She also told me that she sincerely wants to rebuild our relationship, and if I choose to be selfish now, she won't feel comfortable in continuing our relationship. I told her that if money is what makes or breaks it for her, then maybe it's better if we don't have a relationship at all. I wanted to believe her when she said all that crap about rebuilding our relationship. I truly did, but at that point, I couldn't. I told her that I would consider giving our relationship another chance, but the inheritance was out of the question. She looked at me with pure hatred and left my house. I didn't try to stop her at all. Since then, I've talked to a few of my friends. Most of them agree that I did the right thing, but one of my closest friends said that since I don't really care about the money, I should just let it go and let my daughter have at least some of it if it meant having family in my life. I don't agree with this, but ever since he said it, I can't get it out of my head. Should I give my daughter part of my inheritance? Update 1. Hello. This post got more responses than I expected. Thanks for your advice and opinions. It helped me see things clearly. I guess I'll start by answering the most common question. What happened during my divorce? I haven't talked about it for years, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. So, my wife and I were married for 23 years. You'd think after all those years she wouldn't be able to betray me, but she did. I really don't want to get into the details, but I found out that she was cheating on me with multiple men. Apparently, it had been going on for years before I finally discovered it. When I discovered it, I was completely shattered. I didn't know how to confront her, so I started drinking heavily and sleeping around as well. I almost ruined my life. I argued a lot with her, and I guess that, and the drinking made it really easy for her to manipulate my daughter into taking her side. After almost a year of living like that, and being separated, we finally faced each other and got divorced. My ex-wife was a journalist at the time, and as kind of a local celebrity, she used her influence to try to destroy my reputation and was almost successful. After the divorce, it took me a lot of time to stop drinking and get back to my normal life. As I've said already, my daughter completely leaving me did not help, to say the least. I'll admit that when I found out about my ex's affairs, I kind of lost it and wasn't present as a parent for my daughter. Even during the time I was separated, and for a year or so after the divorce, I pretty much always stayed to myself and wasn't there for my daughter. But once I stopped drinking and got my life back together, the first thing I did was to reach out to her and apologize, but she refused to listen to me and blocked me everywhere. I thought giving her time would work, and she would eventually come around, but here we are 8 years later, and our relationship has only gotten worse with time. Now, the other big question about my mom's inheritance. Well, technically, the money belonged to my father. My grandparents were both doctors and had bought property all over the city during their careers. Most of it was rented out and ended up bringing a lot of money. Dad passed away when I was 21 and left everything to Mom. All of it remained in her name during my marriage and for a few years after my divorce while her health was still good. After Mom passed away, I received everything as her sole heir. My wife didn't receive anything in the divorce except alimony till she got remarried a few years ago because my mom owned everything at the time. So, the way things stand, my daughter never even got close to owning anything. She knew, of course, that her grandma was a landlady and owned a couple of Airbnbs, but I never touched any of that money because the money I made from my old construction business was more than enough to live comfortably. I hope I've answered all your questions. Also, my daughter hasn't reached out to me after that night, and I don't think she will. To be honest, I think she made it pretty clear that she only put up this whole show for the inheritance, and now that it's out of question, I don't expect to see her around anymore. I'd be lying if I said I am not at all upset about it, but at this point, I know not to expect too much out of people, no matter who they are. So, that's that, I guess. Thanks to all of you for sending support. I appreciate it. I also think it's maybe time for me to put myself out there and maybe get back into dating and find companionship instead of expecting ghosts from my past to come around. Update 2. What a week, guys. I thought that was the end of it, but I guess life had other ideas. Anyway, I had just come back from work and was thinking about going out with some friends when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but opened the door, and there she was. My worst nightmare. She has changed her hair and lost some weight, so it took me a couple of seconds to recognize her. But it's hard to forget someone you were with for decades, huh? Seeing her was quite a shock, to say the least. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there awkwardly. She then asked me if I had a minute to talk about some stuff. I was reluctant, but didn't want her to stand there at my door, so I just invited her in. It was really awkward, as you guys can probably imagine. We made small talk about this and that, and then she said that she understood that this was a bit weird, but there were some things she needed to tell me. I asked her to go on, and she said that our daughter reached out to her and told her about the inheritance. I think I kind of saw that coming. I mean, why else would she need to talk to me after all those years? Anyway, she said that she understood the divorce was really hard on me, and that she went too far with some things. I just snorted at that, but she ignored my reaction. She then said that I shouldn't punish my daughter for what happened between the two of us. She said the same things my daughter has said, such as her being very young at the time of the divorce, and how I can't be bitter towards her for choosing her mother over me. I just stopped her at that point and said that I have no bitterness towards anyone anymore, and that even if I had any anger, it wouldn't be towards her daughter. I told her that I was hurt at the realization that after all those years, she only thought of reaching out to her father because there was a chance of getting some money out of it. I told her the same thing I told my daughter, that if she had the decency to try and reconnect earlier, she would have ended up with the inheritance. My ex tried to put up some sort of defense, but I told her that my decision was final, and if they're just gonna go around in circles about this one thing, then they're wasting everyone's time. I said that I had plans, and that if there was nothing else to talk about, she should probably leave. She nodded and apologized for bothering me, and I told her there was no need for that, and she left. After she left, I just sat there in disbelief. I never expected to ever see her again, let alone have a conversation in my home. It was strange and brought up a lot of old memories that I would rather not have thought about ever again. I went out with my friends and tried to forget all about it. So, yeah, that happened and I needed to get it off my chest. Thanks for reading along, if you're still here. Update 3. I have another update for you guys. So, this afternoon I was at work when I got a call from my daughter. I thought of not answering, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered, and immediately told her that if this was about the inheritance, then I really don't think there's a reason for us to talk. She said that there was something else she wanted to talk about. I asked her to go on, and she said that she had been reflecting a lot on what happened and felt like she owes me an apology. She said that she understood that she should have acted differently, and that if I was willing to forgive her and give our relationship another chance, then she would be happy to have me at her wedding. I was really surprised, to say the least. I asked her if she was sure about it, and she said yes, and that I could take some time to think about it and let her know if I'd be there or not. I said all right, and we hung up. I'm really confused now. A part of me is ecstatic at the thought of being at her wedding, but I also can't seem to get rid of the feeling that this is just some way for her to get on my good side and eventually get the inheritance. At the same time, if she's actually being honest, I don't want to ruin my chance at being in her life. If I say no and she never contacts me again, I could hardly blame her. I'd appreciate some advice if anyone would like to help me out. Update 4. I've made up my mind to go to the wedding. Many of you said that going to the wedding wouldn't hurt anything. I guess that's true. It's not like I have to give anything in return for being invited to the wedding. Also, no, I'm not in the wedding party. I'd just be a guest. I'm okay with that, as I understand that going from someone she hasn't talked to in 8 years to someone walking her down the aisle at the wedding is a huge jump. I don't think either of us would be comfortable with that. I really do hope this is the beginning of a new chapter and that we can create something meaningful out of this. Thanks to all of you for listening and all the advice you've given. I appreciate it and hope you guys wish me luck.